The story of Hunter x Hunter has largely followed the journey of Gon Freaks as he aspired to become a hunter in order to search for his dad. Throughout his journey he has passed the hunter exams, learned how to use Nen, explored new places, faced greater and greater challenges, and has developed his skills from several teachers across the story. Given how quickly he has developed his power, it goes without saying that Gon is an unbelievable talent. In fact, Wing considered him to be a 1 in 1 million talent. I'm sure it's made us all wonder what exactly Gon would look like and how strong he would be if he actually lived up to that 1 in 1 million potential. Meruem, on the other hand, feels like a complete outlier that literally doesn't belong in this manga. It would be no exaggeration to say that ever since his birth, it's been like having a Dragon Ball Z character drop from the sky and landed in York New City. The king of the ants, born with the role to dominate the world, comes across as more of a right for him rather than a mere ambition. Adult Gon vs Meruem has been a hot topic for years, and that's because Togashi has gone out of his way to feed us with this question. So we'll be tackling this question to figure out who has the right to claim the title of the strongest. Before we delve into it though, if you enjoy Hunter x Hunter content like this, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel, as it will encourage me to make more of this in future, and as always, your support is much appreciated. In order to understand how much adult Gon and Meruem gap the rest of the verse, it all starts with Isaac Netero. Even as an extremely old man, Netero is still considered by Nov and Morel to be the strongest hunter in the world. In fact, this is just outright reiterated in the Hunter Guide, as it dubs Netero as being at the top of the world of hunters. Despite admitting inferiority to Pito at first sight, Netero after training for a month was so fast that he completely blitzed her, and was so strong that he can slap her away for miles with just a regular prayer. In the opener of volume 21, Pito is stated to be the most formidable enemy Gon and Killua have faced up until that point, which includes Hisoka, Illumi, and most of the Phantom Troop. Meruem even calls Netero the pinnacle of individuality, which gives the feel that this fight is portrayed as the strongest of man versus the strongest of creatures. Even with all that, Meruem could brush up Netero's third hand and resolve with just a fraction of his full power, which only amounted to that of a child throwing a tantrum. This is an insane metaphor Togashi used to describe the difference in their power, as Kurapika states the difference between one who uses Nen and one that doesn't is greater than the difference between an adult and a child. In other words, Meruem dwarfs the cast so much that they might as well be non-Nen users compared to his true power. Meruem is also an unparalleled intellect to couple with his unparalleled combat prowess. He has defeated multiple national champions at various board games in a matter of days after just flicking through the rulebooks. Netero is the only human in the Hunter manual listed with a 5 out of 5 in both intelligence and ingenuity, and Meruem was still able to fight him without trying to kill him, which he compared to playing without a bishop and a rook. Now, I don't claim to be a chess grandmaster, but playing without a rook and a bishop against another advanced player is an extremely arduous task. This is because the rook and the bishop amount to 25% of the material power of non-pawn pieces, meaning that it's next to impossible to win with these odds against another advanced player. However, Meruem's intellect and combat prowess far exceeds the pinnacle that he was still able to endure and get through over 1,000 of Netero's Buddha combinations to ultimately cripple him. In fact, Netero's Guanyin is not only shown to be, but is stated to be faster than Meruem himself. Not only that, Netero's aura was extremely quiet, meaning no one could read his next move from the flow of his aura. However, Meruem was able to develop a level of intellect akin to future sight to get through his combinations. Even the Zero Hand, which comprises of all of Netero's aura, had little effect on the king, as he walked off the attack with just a few scratches to show for it. So it's no exaggeration to say that Meruem's a literal anomaly in the series. However, despite the obvious feats and portrayal he has, there are still some detractors to his supremacy, which primarily stems from the ranking of the 5 threats. The 5 threats of the 5 species and organisms that were brought back from the voyages to the Dark Continent. Togashi gave these specimens, including humans and Chimera ants, a ranking of how deadly they are based on their aggression to humans, their numbers, fecundity, threat to bodily harm, and a total letter ranking factoring these criteria. This total letter ranking determines how much of a threat each specimen presents and how severe the response to the threats needs to be. Now, I'm not about to go on a whole spiel about the 5 threats, as you can read that up yourselves. However, the point of me bringing this up is this argument that since the Chimera ants are a B rank threat, that in the grand scheme of things, Meruem isn't all that strong. This is fundamentally a gross misunderstanding of what the ranking of of the 5 threats is supposed to represent. The ranking is supposed to represent the entire species based on the 4 criteria that we've outlined, not the individuals within said species. For example, an individual human is a C rank, whereas the Chimera ants are a B rank. However, we know for a fact that there are some humans that are stronger than some ants and vice versa. It'd be foolish to say that Zeno is weaker than Whelping simply because of their species' respective rankings. If I had to debunk every creative argument people use with these 5 threats, I would be here all day, but hopefully that simple example draws home the point. Now that Meruem has more or less been covered, we can easily segue to adult Gon, who Peter assessed was a threat to the king. This has somehow become a debatable subject because of the difference in language used between the anime and the manga. In the 2011 anime, it stated that adult Gon became equal to the king, whereas in the manga, it stated that Gon's fangs might even sink into the king. This semantical argument that's been going on for years now is honestly just a lazy attempt at trying to downplay Gon. But what if I told you that Pito's line in the anime is actually a mistranslated subtitle, and in fact corroborates not only with episode 125, but also the manga itself? Not only that, but what if I said that the manga likely offers better scaling assertions for Gon than the mistranslated subtitle did? In episode 131, what Pito actually says about adult Gon is, quote, "As I thought, I was right. This guy's fangs really were able to reach the king." End quote. So no matter which source you take, the idea being presented is the fear Pito had of Gon's potential power initially was actually true and realized when Gon transformed. She even resolves herself to eliminate Gon on 2 separate occasions for that very reason. So the metaphor of fangs sinking into one's throat is just a figurative way of saying that Gon might actually be able to kill Meruem. If we take a more literal translation of what Pito says in chapter 306, which I'll show on the screen, it supports the idea that she believes for certain that Gon would actually sink his figurative fangs into Meruem's throat. This translation could also be interpreted as Gon just simply reaching Meruem's level of power, however that lacks the context of what she was following up on in chapter 295. Long story short, based on Pito's assessment, Gon is at the bare minimum comparable to Meruem and would likely be a serious threat to the king's life. Killer would describe adult Gon's state as if he had gone through decades of training, which is reflected in Togashi's Nen exhibition chart, as he's listed as reaching the ultimate stage as an enhancer, meaning he reached the apex of his Nen ability. Additionally, Gon's aura reserves, or POP, would have grown significantly, probably even higher than Yuppie's, who at least had 700,000 aura. Not only that, but Gon's aura output would have also increased, as Knuckle explains that well-trained Nen users can output more of their total aura reserves due to having better aura flow and control. To put this into perspective, Gon during his training with Knuckle normally outputs 1800 aura, which is about 8% of his total aura reserves. 8% is a low amount due to a lack of training, but since adult Gon has fast-tracked himself into becoming a Nen master, he can draw a higher percentage of his new beyond UP amount of aura. Not only that, but the consumption of Gon's aura per minute during combat would decrease a lot, meaning he can fight at a high level for much longer than before. Gon's growth is also reflected in his fight against Pito, where he decimated the strongest royal guard with just a kick and his trademark rock. This is the same Pito who was able to take a bloodlusted attack from Meruem despite kneeling and got off with just a bruise to her face, whereas a simple kick from adult Gon sent Pito flying in the air and bloodied up. So in terms of strictly physical power, Gon far outclasses the king. This isn't even accounted for Gon's Janken rock, which amplifies his aura and is multiple times stronger than his regular strikes. As an ultimate stage enhancer, Gon is not only at the peak of physical strength, but is also at the peak of physical speed. Post-mortem Pito was able to outpace Godspeed Killua and cut Gon's arm off before Killua was able to protect him. Even though Pito had a distance advantage, it wasn't by a significant margin for her speed to not be mid to high relative to Killua's speed. Additionally, it's not that Gon couldn't react to Pito in that moment, he deliberately allowed his arm to be cut off so he could feel the same pain that Kai felt. The next time Pito tried to attack, Gon easily reacted to her and stuck his loose arm into her chest. So in terms of overall physical ability alone, it's no exaggeration to say that adult Gon is in a class of his own. The specific vow Gon took to reach his level was to sacrifice all his Nen in order for his physical ability and Nen ability to fully mature. Although Killua likened Gon's growth to having done years of training, we can't say for sure that his intelligence or ingenuity grew. Even if it did, Meruem's is on a whole nother level and an unrivaled intellect. Contrary to popular belief though, Gon is a very respectable intellect in his own right, being listed as a 3 out of 5 in intelligence, which in this case is more so knowledge, and a 5 out of 5 in ingenuity. Gon has always been a very creative intellect, figuring out new ways to compete against Nen users that are sometimes even stronger than him. So now that we've covered the key components of Nen combat, who is truly the strongest? Meruem and Gon are both primarily physical fighters, and as we've covered, in terms of physical ability, Gon has the clear advantage in both raw power and speed. Although Meruem has the intellect to read the bias in his opponent's next move, the only reason why this strategy worked against Netero was because he was durable enough to withstand Netero's onslaught long enough to figure out a path through his nigh invincible defense. He wouldn't have the same luxury against Gon, as his power is great enough to deal heavy damage to him from the get-go. In fact, part of the reason why Melioron wanted to team up with Gon was due to the seemingly bottomless potential that he sensed. Based on that potential, he thought if they were able to catch Meruem off guard with a mega punch, they'd be able to win no matter how strong the king seems to be. On the flip side, Gon's attack patterns are nowhere near as complex or as numerous as Netero's, so Meruem would have a much easier time reading Gon's moves and avoiding his lethal attacks despite being physically slower than him. Ultimately, all the signs point to and favour adult Gon as the strongest, primarily because of the clear physical advantages he has, but also the heavy narrative implication that he's the predator, as Togashi uses the imagery of a tiger after its prey. How their durability would fare against each of their APs is questionable due to no upper end scaling in that department. However, if I had to guess, I'd probably still take Gon due to him being a far greater enhancer. Given the fact that they're both physical types of fighters and Gon has a massive raw power advantage as well as the versatility from paper and scissors, his win conditions are easier to pull off, so he'd more than likely get the win more times than not. Up until now, we've been comparing Gon to base Meruem, but as we all know, the king becomes far stronger once he absorbs the majority of Poof and Youpi's aura. Some have either forgotten or straight up didn't realize, but Meruem does in fact have a Nen ability of his own, and that's the ability to gain the aura of Nen users that he eats. Even consuming the aura of a regular Nen user, Meruem felt a surge in energy within him, showing a great amount of growth despite consuming a relatively small amount of aura. Through Meruem's aura synthesis, he gained Youpi's Rage Cannon, which was able to leave a huge crater in the royal palace, and Meruem himself used it to destroy a huge rock formation. Meruem also gained Poof's spiritual message, which allowed him to read the emotions of those within his N and even detect when someone is lying to him. Reading emotions and thoughts also helps Meruem to read incoming attacks, which will help him close the gap in physical speed between him and Gon. Post Rosebomb, Meruem became so strong that Knuckle was convinced that they would need the state military to deal with him, and this was the first time that the Royal Guard were shown that one can overwhelm everything else just off their aura alone. Gon most likely still has the physical advantage against this enhanced Meruem, especially with his rock, but when factoring Meruem's Rage Cannon, his light speed N, and his mind reading spiritual message to go along with his superior intellect, it'd be a steep mountain for Gon to climb. So to conclude, it's no surprise that adult Gon vs Meruem is a contentious subject, which is probably written that way by design. However, I'm convinced that Togashi symbolizing Gon as the predator in a matchup that could have been gives him the narrative edge over the king of the ants. When it's all said and done though, post-Rose Meruem still exists. Even if this meta was short-lived, he still stakes his position as the winner and the one who deserves to be crowned the strongest in Hunter x Hunter. That's all there is to say for this topic, so if you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe to the channel and let me know what other Hunter x Hunter topics you'd like to see me cover in future. I've been the one and only Zage, and until next time.